think, again, the time of, hiding behind your keyboard and a PowerPoint and a 1-hour demo during your sales process, those aren't going to win you the deals. So we need to be thinking about, even when we're digital, how do we create those connections with our customers? How do we think in the mindset that we would be when we're in those in-person meetings? Because I hear, I do a lot of work in the video space, and I hear time and time again from sellers who say, I'm not comfortable getting on camera or, recording a video. And, my first reaction is usually, well, you picked the wrong profession, my friend. Because, this is your opportunity for your personality to shine, for your passion to come through.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Tyler Lessard. Tyler is the VP of Marketing and Chief Video Strategist at Vidyard. Now, as you might expect, Tyler and I are going to spend some time talking about video communication, in particular, video messaging. However, before we get to that, Tyler and I talk about his time at Blackberry and some of the lessons that he learned from that experience of seeing that particular king of the hill dethroned by newcomers to a space, in this case, smartphones. So then we dig into this whole area of video messaging, not video calling, not Zoom, but using video asynchronously to communicate effectively with prospects. We get into what it takes to get a sales team to embrace this whole idea of video messaging and using it. Tyler shares some compelling stats about why you'd want to use video messaging in terms of opens and response rates. And he also shares his key tips about what sales teams need to think about when rolling out a video program. And lastly, we get into what sellers have to do to humanize their messages. After all, that is the point of video messaging, to reveal the human behind the message. So we'll talk about how not to be robotic and how to be more human on camera. All this and much, much more. Before we get to Tyler, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it with Tyler. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Andy.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So where have you been hiding out during the pandemic?
Well, I've been spending most of my time either in my home video studio / home office, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
In the Toronto area, right?
Yes, I'm based just outside of Toronto here, enjoying the final throes right now of our summertime.
Before snow starts, I mean.
Yes, exactly.
10 months of winter and 2 months of bad skating.
Well, we're making the most that we can, and I'm very grateful to have had put a swimming pool in recently, which has been incredible this year to keep my kids somewhat occupied while I'm trying to keep the engines going here. So that's been a win for me. I'll take that.
Yeah. And when school starts, or has it started, are they going to be back in the classroom, or is it still remote?
Yeah, my kids will be heading back to the classrooms. They'll be wearing masks and doing all the precautions, but they are just chomping at the bit to go and see their friends. I don't think they care about school one way or the other, but man, do they want to see their friends. So I'm excited for that. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and so isn't that the same for people wanting to get back to the office? I mean, here we've had sort of this forced, work from anywhere environment, work from home, whatever you want to call it. And all the prognosticators want to say, it's going to stay this way. But I think we've been socialized for several thousand years at this point to want to be together with people. I don't think that automatically changes in 6 months.
No, I agree. I've seen news of organizations saying, they're going fully remote now. And, I remember thinking at first, that sounds great. And then I thought about it more and I said, you know what? If I were at a company that said we're all going to be remote, I would probably start looking for another organization, because I personally love the in-person interactions when we have those opportunities. And I think a lot of the folks on our teams absolutely do. And so I feel like we'll land in this hybrid world where we all understand and support the opportunity for people to work in a distributed environment, but that the opportunities are absolutely there for us to be in person, because, the intangibles of those relationships that we forge, the social capital that we create with people, that's not going away. And I'm with you there. I think we need to maintain that. And in fact, fact grow it in the business world.
Yeah, no, I speak from the perspective of somebody who's spent the last 20 years working on my own, with my own business with one employee. But, it's like, I think back to my work experience. I think of the customers I have, the clients I have, and I work with. Now, again, working with the company, it's like, people have the options, but I think people are going to, quite frankly, not everybody's made to be, a solo worker working remotely.
No, absolutely not. And there's all those things that go into those relationships. And it's not just about, compassion and empathy and feeling connected to folks and having their back, but there's all those fun elements that is hard to recreate when we are remote. All those little moments where we share laughter, we go out for a coffee together, we, chat about what's happening in the organization and doing it, co-located in space and having a shared experience around it. I think those are things that are, continue to be meaningful for people, and we've got to find room for that. Right now, we're trying to do it digitally, but I think, I look forward to getting back to when we can do that IRL in an analog way.
It's just not the same. And I think people just have to come to grips with that. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. Doesn't mean it's not great for some people. I said it's been great for me for 20 years. And before that, even though we didn't have video, quite frankly, I was selling to customers overseas. So I was selling most of them virtually. But people want to be together.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is we've had this acceleration. Like the future has gotten pulled forwards thanks to the environment that we're in. And we're all starting to figure out this mode where we can collaborate in this hybrid environment of, distributed in person. We're kind of coming to terms with what that means. We're starting to learn, we're very early days, admittedly, of what does it mean to be a distributed workforce and how do we rethink the way that we do things. But also in terms of how we interact with our customers and externally. Again, this has been, I think, a great forcing function to make us all think about how is it that we evolve, how we communicate and connect with customers, how we share information when we are truly forced to be digital first in our approach. And it's been interesting to be pulled that far over almost having to over-index on it. And and I think you're right. Now we're seeing the cracks, we're seeing what works, we're seeing what doesn't, and I think we're all going to be better for it.
Yeah, Gartner came out with some, quick research by a month or so ago about how 24% of CROs said that they were, shifting, permanently to virtual sales or something. And it's like, my first response to that was, all right, let's ask the question again in 12 months.
Yeah, I feel, it's sales reps are the ones that I personally feel the strongest for, because as a marketer myself, I'm head up the marketing team here at Vidyard, and there's a lot of things that I end up doing that are fairly isolated, specialized tasks, and a lot of people in our teams are specialists who work in their bubbles. They love to socialize, they love to be with people. And you can say the same sort of thing for, the developers in our organization, a lot of the folks in operations. But sales is such a team sport. And it is such a roller coaster from an emotional perspective in terms of how you're working with customers. And my heart really goes out to sales. And I know a number of sales reps who they're absolutely struggling because they're not sitting in a team environment. They don't have people next to them that they can high five or that they can again go out for a coffee or a drink when something doesn't ring the bell with, or to learn from. And I think those younger sales reps as well, if you're in a completely distributed environment, and we can talk about this, but we can do all the training that we want virtually, but there's just there's something about them being in that environment, overhearing other people's conversations, being a part of those team discussions after a call went wrong or a call went right. Those things are difficult, and I would argue that I think sales is probably the most important function to try to get back into physical proximity and having people working as closely together as possible to learn from each other.
Well, I agree. And I think that the member of the team that's missing from that increasingly is the customer. I mean, it is. You have to when people say sales is a team sport, I have to remind them that the most critical member of your team is your customer, right?
Right.
is you are building them, especially if multiple stakeholders. I was just interviewing on the show, or had a episode just a week ago with Mike Robbins, who writes a great book about building teams, and it's like, when you read it, it's like, well, this is exactly what you do to build a good team internally. You do the same steps to build a team with the stakeholders in the decision that you're trying to get with a potential prospect or a potential customer, excuse me. And that is always going to be facilitated and made easier if you can actually be in physical proximity to them, as you talk about. But I think we've trained a generation of sellers because of technology to say, well, really, it's not that important. Right. And I still believe that given the opportunity, and you don't necessarily do it, I don't think field salespeople need to be, depending on the job, most of them, at least in the tech world, don't need to have every interaction with the customer in person. But there's still times it's really important. And I think we've got a generation of sellers that have basically been told, well, not really. If you can do it remotely, do it remotely. It's like, no, there's still moments, critical moments, as you learn that you want to be there. Yeah. And I spoke to a group of enterprise sellers a little over a year or so ago, and sort of had them raise their hands. How many sell something with a lifetime contract value over $200,000? A number of hands go up. I said, well, how many of you actually go visit the customer at some point during the sales process? And no hands went up. And I'm like, I mean, I could tell they all come from a SaaS environment with relatively low win rates. And I just challenged them. I said, you don't need to be there every call, but I can tell you that if I was competing against you, I would be there at the critical moment, and I would win all your deals.
Well, and there's also this aspect that I think we've seen. So there's the, in person versus just remote, but then there's also, we've trained sellers that the two serve very different functions and are handled very differently. That in person is your time for that connection and all those human elements. And then when you're not there in person and you're selling digitally, that means something different. And that's the time when you're sort of almost hiding behind your keyboard and you're focused on efficiency rather than, effectiveness and personalization and relationship building and all of those things. And that's where I start to get really interested in thinking about this new landscape. Say, how do those things blend together? Because, even if we can go and visit our customers, many of us, and many sellers, may not do that, may not do it that frequently. And I think, again, the time of, hiding behind your keyboard and a PowerPoint and a 1-hour demo during your sales process, those aren't going to win you the deals. So we need to be thinking about, even when we're digital, how do we create those connections with our customers? How do we think in the mindset that we would be when we're in those in-person meetings? Because I hear, I do a lot of work in the video space, and I hear time and time again from sellers who say, I'm not comfortable, getting on camera or, recording a video. And, my first reaction is usually, well, you picked the wrong profession, my friend. Because, this is your opportunity for your personality to shine, for your passion to come through, for, to show the picture of the kids, to talk about the sports team, right? Like, this is your opportunity to do those things, to connect with people. And if you don't see that as, as what it is, as an opportunity, if you see it as an obstacle, you've got to start thinking about that very hard and figure out, how do I replicate or get close to those in-person communications as possible when I'm digital. But that doesn't mean that I'm on a Zoom call every hour of every day. So how do those things kind of come together? And so it's neat to see this stuff kind of coalescing, and this hybrid of in-person, digital, and then this gray zone in the middle, which is kind of personal digital. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because already there's been some research saying that actually a phone call is a better way to capture nuance in someone's voice than a Zoom call.
Right.
because there's fewer distractions, right? You're actually listening, you're actually paying attention, and so on. So it's like, sure, we've embraced Zoom for a good reason, and I generally prefer to have a Zoom call as opposed to a phone call for a lot of the reasons you talked about, right? Just because of that, I feel like it's a better chance for me to show me. But yeah, it's not necessarily a given that it's really the most effective tool.
Yeah, and we have so many different tools at our disposal now, and that's part of what we're competing with, right? Because I'll bring it back to something you said earlier. If you're not there in person and one of your competitors is, they have an immediate advantage. And the same thing applies to how people and how sellers are using different forms of media today, because it is all, text, social, video, audio, podcasts, right? The list goes on. That all these mediums are highly accessible to the other sellers you're competing with, and they may or may not be using those as ways to engage those clients. And so I think the most strategic sellers are thinking about that, and they're thinking about this media universe of how they connect. And it's not just we have an email, we have a Zoom call, or an in-person meeting, right? It's like, no, there are all these different formats that you can be communicating with. Even on LinkedIn, I can send you a voice message. I can send you a quick video message, right? Yep. And a lot of reps don't take advantage of those capabilities. Some don't even know they exist. And others just feel like, it's inefficient, or it's not part of the way I do things. That's not how it works more like in my market.
Right? And, my customers don't like it when I do that.
Yeah. No. Why would... Yeah, there's no way they like it. I don't like getting a voice, I don't like getting a voice message. So why would they? And, but there's all these things happening that I think there's so much opportunity for people to just embrace this new media mode and think, geez, how can I connect with people with voice, with intonation, with body language, with all these different things, and use these media and formats for what they're really good for?
Well, and I think the other thing, though, too, is that sellers don't think about, and that things, tools like Vidyard and these other channels of communication are valuable for, is that, and I wrote about this in my second book, is I graphed out what a sales process looks like. And it's sort of on XY axis. And it was like a series of small mountains, right? Where in terms of each one of those represented a point of interaction with the prospect. But in between them, it drops. Right? So you have this, sort of almost not necessarily a wave, but a little more sharp at the peaks. But, when you interact with somebody, that's a big moment. Mm-hmm. And so you sort of build up to that. You deliver, the axes I had, or, time and value. And you're delivering, specific point of value, hopefully. But what happens as soon as you leave the meeting, whether it's a virtual meeting or in person meeting or whatever, they start forgetting about you, right? They forget about you. They forget what you said. And so, the trend line is down, right?
Yeah.
Until it reaches a bottom and you start building for the next interaction. And I think the value of like a Vidyard tool or these other channels is what happens in the gaps between interactions. That's when this becomes so powerful, because in the past, it's sort of like, well, maybe exchange an email and prepare for the next meeting, but there's sort of this gap, the silent period. Yeah. And, sellers just don't sort of keep in mind is that, they're just like everybody. Yeah. We talk about when we train sellers, and they're in the classroom and they take hear a lecture from a sales manager or a guest expert for an hour. And then we know from science with the forgetting curve, then about 24 hours, they've forgotten a good chunk of it.
Yep.
Exact same thing is happening with your prospects.
I love that perspective, and I think there's a lot of insight there. One of the way that I've seen it and heard a lot of dialogue recently is that we as sellers have traditionally thought about sales as it's a meeting-centric kind of synchronous process with our customers. And we become too dependent and too reliant on the meeting or the call or the Zoom call, right, where we're going to tackle some big thing, right? And these are still important, not to say that we shouldn't be doing these. But, to your point, there's a lot of value that happens in those, but then after that, it becomes, okay, when's the next meeting? And then, 2 days before that next meeting is when we'll prep and get things set up for that. And then, by the way, you know what happens 2 hours before that next meeting? Somebody has a conflict and they have to reschedule it for a week later, and you lose yet another week in your sales process and even more time for them to forget what it is you last talked about. And so this mental shift from what I think of as sort of a meeting-centric synchronous selling world to, not going to say entirely meetingless, because synchronous meetings still have their play, but think about that as the other extreme of a meaningless, asynchronous selling world where we are communicating content to our customers as we need it, on demand, consistently. We're not waiting for that big meeting. And then, an opportunity for them to share those ideas, to share that demo, to share that pricing overview asynchronously with others in their organization who may be on different time zones, who may not be able to get on that Zoom call, and be able to move decisions forward faster because they're staying engaged and they're not forgetting, so they can actually process better. But also we're not leaving those time gaps of, let's find a time in everyone's calendar and then dealing with cancellations. And so I think there's something to be said about that idea. And I think the promised land is somewhere in the middle of those two. I don't think it's entirely meeting centric. I don't think it's entirely meetingless. But those reps who have that mentality to say, yep, those meetings are certainly a high point in this process, but each and every day I can be moving this forward by sharing some kind of information, by updating them, by sending them a custom video that walks through that question they asked that they can watch on their own time, and I can get feedback from it the next day, not when they happen to have 30 minutes in their calendar to hop on a live call.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems that most sellers have is they think that the thing they're dealing with the buyer over, this purchase, is the only thing the buyer's doing. Yeah, that this is consumes 8 hours a day of the buyer's time, as opposed to 5 minutes today and 10 minutes 2 days from now, and so on, right? You're just one thing on a long list of things they have to get done. And it might be, depending on the strategic nature of it, it might be more important, might take a little more time. But generally, when you look at it, think about a sales process as being these series of peak events with valleys in between. Yeah, you need to fill the valleys, because the other problem with the valley is, as you talked about, as you start re-engaging with them a couple days before the next scheduled meeting, really what you're doing is you're re-educating them about what you talked about the last time.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and we see, the sellers on our own team, I think, do this very well from what I've seen in that, during the process, they are intentionally dripping information into those accounts. Sometimes it is off the shelf information. It might be, hey, I thought you might like this perspective on this topic point we were discussing, and it was a recent blog post or an article or a video interview or a podcast episode. So they may be sort of adding value as they go and keeping, again, the conversation top of mind. Or it may be, in some cases, where they are creating something custom and sharing it, which could be, it could be just an email, but more often than not, they are recording a quick video using just their webcam to deliver an update, where they're using a screen share to walk through something. And so they may be doing a quick recap of a certain, feature, function, benefit that struck a chord on that previous call. And they're using that as an excuse to touch base again a couple days later and say, hey, I just wanted to send you a quick summary of that feature that we talked about here. I'm actually going to quickly show you exactly what that looks like, so that you've got a visual perspective on what we were talking about. And then they'll spend 2 minutes doing a screen recording, actually showing that and then sending that over.
Right.
And again, it's like little things like that can, I think, go a long way to continuing that conversation in those, off hours, if you will, keeping things top of mind. But, that stuff becomes super shareable. Right. And we, I think we underestimate the importance of giving our champions at these accounts shareable content, shareable information for the others at their organization, because you probably have no idea how many people are really involved in that buying decision.
Yeah.
And so by arming them with those sorts of insights, content, whether it's off the shelf or custom, it can go such a long way, and sometimes farther than we even know, to moving things forward faster. And I think we need to make that just a part of how we sell and a part of our process.
Well, and I think the other part of it too is, and this is, again, a perspective that most sellers don't carry. And I think one of the powers of video messaging, beyond the ones that you talked about already, is that, for every stakeholder involved in a decision, they operate at two levels. They operate at a personal level and at a corporate level. And if you can use video to help you connect at both levels, whether it's content that helps them with a specific priority they have for this project, that they want to share their point of view, so you can customize something that because too often sellers don't really understand what the impact of this purchase is going to mean on the individual stakeholders. And if you really embrace this idea, you need to learn what that is. Well, then now you can start, providing things they can share that align with what they're advocating for, not just what the bigger picture of what they're advocating for. It helps immensely to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I've heard stories from some sales reps, particularly those selling into larger accounts and doing larger deal sizes, who are, now what they're actively doing is, again, building that web of who are all the people that I need to influence that are part of the decision process. They may not be the signers, but they have some stake in this. And what they're doing is they are getting as much insight as they can from their champion on what that individual might care about as part of this process. And they are recording them a custom video like for that individual. So, if I were selling to you, Andy, you might say, hey, Andy, who is it on your finance team that is going to need to be a part of this decision, or on your legal team, or on your, here, or your marketing team, or whomever it is. And if you can help me, let me, help me help you. And, let me know what you think their biggest objections and biggest benefits are going to be. And I'm going to record a quick video for them introducing myself, because they probably won't actually get on a Zoom call. They'll never meet me. They'll have no connectedness to myself as an individual. So I'm going to record a, 2 to 3, maybe 5 minute if needed, video that's for them, where I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to share a little bit about why it is we're so excited to do business with you guys. And I'm going to show them and explain clearly in their terms how it is that I can help them, or how it is I'm going to work with them and their team in this process. And I think that little effort, right, which people say, oh my gosh, I can't produce a video for 10 different people in the buying committee. And I say, well, like if you take out the word produce and you just say capture, right?
Yes,
and
of course
say,
you can.
Yeah. And it's honestly, when you start doing this, it takes no longer than writing out that email and then obsessing over the wording and bullet points.
Well, I was going to say, probably less time once you get practiced at it.
It really does. And that added benefit of not only are you delivering the information, but there's that sort of inherent, human connection that's happening there. And, time and time again, we see that where people, that they won't ignore it as easily or readily when there's a human face staring at them on their screen as the individual delivering that. They're more likely to show up for meetings when you've, again, put yourself on camera prior to it, because there is, again, that, guilt is a powerful motivator for, and when somebody becomes a real person and a face and a voice, as opposed to just an email address, it's like it totally changes the conversation. And so I think
it does that. Yeah, sorry. I think it does that because, again, you're giving people a taste of who you are. And so, the unknown is a great demotivator, right?
Right.
I don't know whether it's going to be worth my time. I don't know who this person is. I don't want to go to that one. Yeah. But if I've seen Tyler on video, or I've seen Andy, a short video, and I responded to it. And I think that's the other thing that's at least in my experience using video messaging, is just that the response rates are so much better that when people respond, then they're more likely to follow up, come to a meeting.
Yeah, there's a lot to a lot to peel back in that with respect to just those nuances of how it again creates that personal connection. And the other piece of it, which I think a lot about, is the value that we are delivering to those prospects or clients, and how it is that we are best respecting their time and making them feel productive and helped and so on. Mm-hmm. And, because there's a lot of times where I'll see, when I'm sold to, I'm often having people send me, hey, read this guide that will explain this. And I'm like, I don't, I'm not going to read your 30-page guide.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. And if that's the most efficient way for me to get this information, then, this is probably not going to go very far. But if you say the neat thing about things like video are that, we can convey, it starts with the simple old adage, right? That, picture's worth 1,000 words, and how much is a video worth? But the reason that we say that is, as we all know, we are, people are generally visual learners. There's so much more information that we can take in from visuals, from people's voice, as you noted earlier, from body language, from pictures, than we can, written text and static information. And so if I can deliver, it's not just about, hey, it's Tyler, I'm sending you this to introduce myself. It's, hey, I wanted to show you exactly what I meant by this. Or I wanted to talk you through the sales proposal so you can clearly understand how this relates to what we talked about. And as I'm walking you through a line item, I'll skip over to another tab on my screen to show you, again, that specific feature or function that you're buying. And so you can remember what it looks like, what it feels like. And using those visuals as a way to deliver more value, to educate them in a shorter period of time, and which ultimately then, better respects their time. You can also use video to waste people's time if you don't use it effectively, right? There's lots of ways in which you can record a 10-minute long video talking about something that could have been summarized much more quickly. So with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think there's a lot of those nuances of both personalizing, humanizing, but also adding value and helping people visually learn, which I think a lot of people will appreciate in the buying process. Yeah.
Well, I'm a huge believer that a lot of the decision, and actually, data sort of bears this out, is, the majority, supposedly, according to Challenger Sale and other studies, of a buyer's decisions based on their buying experience, right? The experience they felt through the journey. And you as the individual are sort of the first exemplification of that. Mm-hmm. And you want people to be able to experience you. Mm-hmm. Because you really become one of those key differentiators, you as a seller, compared to the competition. Because, I operate from a premise that, especially increasingly so these days, but it's always been the case to a large degree, is, products are pretty much interchangeable, right? There are products that come along that have real distinct capabilities over others, but by and large, we're talking about marginal differences. Mm-hmm. And so, I always like to ask the question to groups when I'm speaking is so tell me, how much did you win your last deal by? Did you win by 10%? I'm not talking about price. How much did you win by? What was your margin of victory? And, people really can't quantify that, right?
No.
Well, I don't know. How do I quantify margin of victory on a deal? And I tell them, well, you have to presume it's 1%.
Yeah.
You just had to be 1% better. Yeah. So that 1% could be just to your point, how effectively you engaged and communicated with people throughout the process. And to your point, did you give them a 38-page white paper to read about what you did as part of your content strategy, or which is basically asking them to do work, or did you make it easy for them?
Yeah.
With, hey, more bite-sized insights I'm providing throughout the process, questions I may be prodding you with that maybe we didn't ask as part of discovery, but still things that you need to think about, perspectives, all these things that can be accomplished very effectively using video messaging.
Yeah, one of my best experiences as a buyer recently was, and you don't say that often, right? As a buyer, I had this great experience. It's so few and far between where we say that these days, but I had a great experience not that long ago with an organization that was selling to me. And through the process, a lot of the validation and support they provided was through other stories of other customers that they worked with. But they took something a little bit further than usual. They sure enough shared like a link to their case study and, the usual quotes, and which we all know, right? It's like, yep, sure, I get it, right? Everybody's got quotes and everybody's got testimonials. Yep. But what they did is they actually took it a little bit further and recorded a video showing how that customer had actually done what they had done. Right. So they actually, in their case, because it was kind of a software related solution, they were able to, without showing anything confidential, bring up examples of what that organization had tactically done using their service. And they actually walked through it. So it was like, hey, go read the case study. Lots of beautiful quotes in there, lots of big stats. But I want to actually show you what they actually did to get those results so you can see tactically how that manifested. And then you have a reference point for like, oh, I could do that. Right. Because when I look at the case study, I'm like 50% increase in such and such. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. Blah, blah. Maybe I don't know. Right. I don't know. But when I actually see the example and they walk me through and say, so then they did this and then here's how this happened and this. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. I know I can do those things. And so if that's what I need to do to get to that result, it clicks for me now. Right. And so just like walking through those and in my terms, right? So again, it wasn't just a generic video. It was like, here's how this relates to what you're thinking about. And yeah, it took them a little bit more time to record those, but it was so helpful. And for me, that was like, the best 10 minutes I spent watching those videos because it really armed me with the confidence I needed, the knowledge I needed. And then as we moved further down the process, just before we were about to make the decision, they sent over another video, which was a montage of the different people on their team that we would be interacting with, introducing themselves and explaining their role in helping us. So it was this, hey, don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I wanted to introduce you to the different people that you'd be working with if you do come on board. And then it cuts to, it's the CFO and it's like, hey, I'm Dennis, the CFO here. Really hope to work with you guys. I'll take care of all the blah, blah, blah. And then it's the COO, and then it's the actual support rep that we would be assigned. And they're each just like 20 seconds of them introducing themselves, right? Some of them said something personal, like I like long walks on beaches and, I listen to heavy metal punk music, whatever it is, right? And I still remember getting that video and going, oh, this is terrific. I mean, both because I'm a video guy, but it was like I immediately met all these people and I was like, all right, like I'm in. Like I these people, I can tell they're into it, they care, and I felt connected. And I said, you know what? I can see myself doing business with these people. And that was like the closing. That was their close, right? I'm like, I'm done. I'm in.
That is the moment, right? Though, I mean, is this thought that I can see myself doing business with these people?
Yep.
It starts with one person. And so if you're a rep that, get comfortable with the video, you use it effectively, which also is time efficient for the buyer. But their perception of working with the company is based on the perception of working with you. Right. I mean, yes, the video of all those people is great, but based on what you said before, it had been done so well, your impression of that company is really formed by the videos you're getting from that one individual.
Yeah, it's. I think that's absolutely right. And then it was reinforced through the montage video. But again, even in that case, that helped me trust the rep that I was working with because they took the time to go out and get those videos made for me and all of that. So yeah, again, I think, I wish I had the scanners hooked up to my brain as that all happened so we could see it light up in different areas and we could go, oh, that's what happened, right? I can't tell you exactly what happened. I can know, but what I can tell you is that it was memorable. And it, sparked, confidence, it sparked trust. And it made me smile. And like all those things, in today's business world, it goes such a long way when everybody's got the same feature specs, speeds, feeds, testimonials. So those intangibles became so important. And I encourage you all to think about doing similar kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so don't have a lot of time left here, but let's just talk about that as quickly as, the major barriers to adoption, because, this technology's been out there, video messaging for a while. it's, the stats I've seen is that, improved open rates, what I've experienced when I've used it myself on a consistent basis is, response rates very high. It's like, okay, if you're a seller and you're trying to reach out to people, it's just, take it right at the beginning. You're trying to reach out, grab someone's attention, to open the door to a conversation. Why wouldn't you be doing this? I know some teams that use it uniformly.
Right.
I mean, I've gotten with the program and others that, I sometimes feel like the managers think, well, yeah, if we do that, we can't make our 50 calls a day. And it's like, well, but if you're being much more effective and get better response rates, do 30 a day, video messages. You don't need to do 50.
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks, for the individuals as well as the managers, part of it is simply the fear of the unknown. And, is this going to work? It's new, right? I don't know. Like, I've never incorporated recording and sending video messages as part of our prospecting. I have done lots of emails, done lots of phone calls. I can tell you exactly what our conversion rates are on those programs, and I can, it's predictable. But I think that's part of the challenge, as with any new approach or new technology or new methodology, is that inherent, unknown that comes with it. And so I think for a lot of people, now is the time to just start to experiment with this, because if you rewind a couple of years ago, this whole idea of recording and sending somebody a video, it wasn't even feasible without jumping through serious hoops and posting a video to YouTube. But the reality now, for those of you that, this is a new idea, what we're talking about here is, there's tools like Vidyard and others that it's literally one click in your Chrome browser or Gmail or Outlook to record a video using your webcam or a screen share. And then one click that it will drop the thumbnail image of that video into a message. Could be an email, could be a social message. And that hyperlinks out to a page to watch that video. And you send it off. So it's literally as easy as click to record, click to send. And when somebody clicks to watch it, they go to a dedicated page, they watch that quick video, and they move on. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just starting to understand that of like, oh, wow, we can try this out. It's easy. It's free. I can just get going. So let's start experimenting with it. But then where we also start to see people fail is that either they try it a few times, right? Like a lot of different things. They try it a few times. It doesn't have the immediate response. And then they're like, it didn't work. Let's try something else, right? It's kind of like cold calling, right? If you made 5 cold calls and didn't book a meeting, would you give up on it? Probably not. You'd probably, sort of keep at it. You'd learn as you go, and you'd start to master it and learn it. And I think video is the same way. That right now we just got to think about, how do we try it? How do we put it through its proper paces? But also, how do we use it in different ways creatively? Because that's also where a lot of people get blocked. Is okay, I get it. I can record a video and send it, but I don't even know, like, when does that fit into my sales process? Why would I do that? And I think that's just where you've got to put it through the lens of the people on your team or your own role and say, well, if I'm prospecting, if I'm doing outbound prospecting for new business, the role of video becomes getting people's attention and getting them to respond, right? So now it's a tool to stand out by mixing it up and not just sending an email or a phone call, but sending a message with a video that's bright, that's visual, that gives them a chance to respond in a bigger way and boost your response rates. So that's like the role it can play in prospecting. If you're talking to account executives who they're not trying to get noticed, they're trying to move deals forward and build those relationships and shorten their deal cycles and increase their close rates. And then you start to say, oh, well, in that case, video becomes a tool now to maintain that personal rapport, to your point, with periodic video messages to keep the conversation going. It also becomes a way to educate people faster by delivering them richer content that they can see, not just hear what it is you're talking about. And so it becomes a way to build the relationship and to shorten deal cycles by accelerating their knowledge, accelerating their education. And so I think, we just gotta keep that in mind of there's lots of ways we can use it. Video isn't a separate thing. It's another way to communicate with your customers and try to achieve your goals. It just so happens that you're looking into a camera instead of looking at your keyboard.
Right. No, I love it. All right. Well, Tyler, we've unfortunately run out of time, but been great having you here.
Well, thank you so much. That was a terrific conversation. I really appreciate hearing your insights as well. I think this is a really neat time for all of us and a time to try new ideas. So I appreciate it, Andy. Thank you.
And if people want to connect with you, how could they do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. So Tyler Lessard, Lessard, VP Marketing at Vidyard. So please connect with me there. You can also head on over to our website at vidyard.com, and you can actually start using some of these tools for free if you're so inclined. Vidyard.com/free. You can sign up and literally within 3 minutes be recording and sending videos out to your clients. So give it a whirl and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think.
All right, Tyler, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, we're so grateful for your support of this podcast. And I want to thank my guest, Tyler Lessard, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or review, let us know how we're doing. Well, we'd certainly appreciate it. You can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.